It crept in after my divorce, soft at first, like the hush that follows laughter once the guests leave. I was still young enough to be called attractive at gatherings, old enough for it to feel like a compliment dipped in pity. 42, with a grown son and a quiet house. My friends often told me I was lucky. Freedom, independence, time to find myself again. But what they didn't see were the nights when I stood in front of the mirror, untying my hair slowly, wondering if anyone would ever run their fingers through it again. My son Adam had just turned 24. He had always been the gentle one, observant, considerate, with a quiet calm that mirrored my own. After college, he'd chosen to stay in the city for work, visiting me on weekends when he could. I lived in a small lakeside town, and for a long time, I convinced myself that the solitude was a blessing. That is, until Adam came to stay with me for a month. His office closed for renovations. His lease coincidentally ending. Began so simply. I was sipping tea on the back porch when he arrived. I still remember the way the late summer sun lit his face as he stepped out of the car, waving with that boyish grin that always made my chest ache with pride. He carried a duffel bag and a box of books, always his essentials. "Mom," he said warmly, pulling me into a hug that lingered just a second longer than I remembered. That evening we made dinner together. It felt natural. His hands chopping vegetables beside mine, our elbows bumping, laughter weaving between words. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Over the next few days something shifted. Not in him. Me. I started to notice things I shouldn't have. The way he moved in the kitchen, towel slung over his shoulder. How he looked when reading, brows furrowed in concentration, one hand absent-mindedly running through his hair. He had grown into a man in the blink of an eye, and I, though I tried to smother the thought, had begun to see him as more than my son. Not in a way that made sense, and certainly not in a way I could speak aloud. But in the way my heart would beat a little faster when I heard the shower running, or how I sometimes held my breath when he walked into a room shirtless. It was irrational, shameful even. But feelings aren't always rational. One night we were sitting on the couch watching an old movie, something from my youth that he pretended to enjoy for my sake. The lights were dim, the wine we shared was making my thoughts feel soft and slow. He turned to say something mundane, but the moment hung in the air. His voice low, his eyes searching mine. I looked away first. "Mom," he said gently. "You okay?" "Yeah," I replied quickly, my voice tight. "Just tired." But I wasn't. I was wide awake, every cell in my body humming with awareness. That night, I lay in bed with the door slightly ajar, listening to the soft sound of him brushing his teeth down the hall. His footsteps on the creaky floorboards. I told myself that it was only because I was alone for too long. That the attention, the warmth, the connection, it was nothing more than the human hunger for closeness. But deep down I knew something was beginning. Something I couldn't name. Something that would soon demand to be felt. The days grew warmer, the air heavy with the promise of late summer storms, but all I could think about was him. Adam. His presence wrapped around every part of the house now. Not just his shoes by the door or his toothbrush beside mine, but the way his voice lingered even after he left a room. I found myself drawn to him in the smallest ways. A laugh shared over breakfast, a brush of fingers when passing plates at dinner. And when he wasn't near, I felt a strange, aching absence. I began looking for excuses to be close to him. That evening, the quiet of the house felt louder than usual. I stood in front of my closet, staring at a satin robe I hadn't worn in years. Deep navy blue, soft to the touch, a garment I once wore when I wanted to feel elegant, wanted. I slipped it on, the silk hugging my skin like memory. A spritz of perfume, one that used to drive my ex-husband wild, and I lightly curled my hair. Just enough to soften the lines of my face, to feel feminine. I wasn't sure what I was doing, only that I wanted to see Adam. I found him in his room, sprawled across the bed with a book in hand. He looked up as I leaned against the doorframe. His eyes catching the gleam of the satin, the loose curl of my hair. I watched the moment his gaze changed, how it hesitated, then darted quickly back to the page. "Hey," I said softly. "How's the book?" He smiled, the corners of his lips twitching, but he didn't meet my eyes. "It's good. Just got to the part where things start to unravel." I stepped closer, my bare feet silent against the carpet. "Mind if I stay for a bit?" He nodded, scooting up slightly to make space beside him. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the way his fingers absently traced the lines of text, though I could tell he wasn't reading anymore. "You've been tense lately," I said gently. "Your shoulders, your back. I notice these things." He gave a soft laugh, finally glancing at me. "I guess I've been hunched over this book for too long." "Lie down," I offered, my voice even but warm. "Let me give you a little massage. Just for a few minutes." He hesitated, just for a breath, but then turned onto his stomach, folding his arms beneath his head. I knelt beside him on the bed, the fabric of my robe whispering across my skin as I settled. My hands hovered for a moment, then touched his back, warm through the thin cotton of his t-shirt. I started slow, my fingers tracing the edges of his shoulder blades, working gently into the tight muscles. He exhaled, a soft sound, and I felt him begin to relax beneath my touch. "You're always doing so much," I murmured. "Carrying too much, thinking too hard." "Someone has to," he replied, his voice muffled, but there was a note of tenderness in it. "Especially for you." My hands paused just briefly. Then I resumed, letting my touch glide up to the base of his neck. He smelled faintly of cedar and soap, the scent stirring something in me that I wasn't ready to name. His skin was warm and I could feel the heat rising in me too. Emotional, electric. He didn't speak again, only breathed steadily, as if surrendering to the quiet closeness of the moment. When I finally drew my hands away, he turned slightly, his cheek brushing against the pillow as he looked up at me. "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly. But his eyes lingered on me, on the curve of the robe at my shoulder, on the soft tendrils of hair that had fallen loose. There was something else there, something unspoken but unmistakable. I smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from his brow. "Anytime, sweetheart." I left his room with my heart pounding, unsure of what I had started. Only that it wasn't finished. Sleep did not come easily that night. Even long after I had left Adam's room, his warmth lingered on my fingertips. I lay in bed, my body tangled in the sheets, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan doing little to soothe the unrest inside me. I turned from side to side, pressing my thighs together around the blanket, trying to chase away the thoughts that clung to me like dew. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was his mother, his guide, his anchor, not someone who longed for the sound of his footsteps in the hallway or replayed every glance like a secret. But loneliness has a way of revealing the cracks beneath the surface. And mine were wide open now. By morning I hadn't made peace with my thoughts, but I had made a choice. The day was warm, the sun rising with a golden brilliance that made everything feel softer. I pulled open the closet doors and found the red swimsuit I hadn't worn in years, simple but striking, with thin straps and a low back that kissed the curve of my spine. I slipped into it, smoothed my robe over the top, and gathered the rest of what I needed. Blueberries and strawberries in a little basket. A bottle of water. My favorite body oil with the scent of citrus and almond. Yes, I brought my quiet companion, tucked carefully into the bottom of the bag. I didn't know if I would use it, but the idea of having it nearby was a comfort of its own. The lake was about a 15-minute walk through a quiet forest path, nestled away from the road, a hidden cove only locals knew about. It had always been our special spot, even when Adam was younger. But I hadn't been there in years, not since before the divorce. Felt like the perfect place to disappear for a few hours. I stepped into the kitchen just as Adam was descending the stairs. His hair was tousled from sleep, his shirt hanging loose over his frame. He paused when he saw me, his eyes running over me instinctively before catching themselves. "You're up early," he said, his voice still husky from sleep. I smiled, pretending not to notice the way his gaze had dipped. "Thought I'd go to the lake for a bit. Get some sun. Clear my head." He rubbed the back of his neck, his eyes returning to mine with a flicker of curiosity. "You're going alone?" I nodded, reaching for the basket. "I just need a little time." He looked out the window, then back at me. "Mind if I join you? I'll get dressed and meet you there." There was something in his voice, casual but not entirely. A subtle edge of curiosity, maybe even protectiveness. "Of course," I said, my voice calm, though inside I felt a ripple of something I couldn't name. As I stepped out into the warmth of the morning, the breeze brushing gently against my bare legs, I couldn't help but feel as though the day held something different, something unspoken. I walked slowly, letting the sun touch my skin, the scent of pine and wildflowers rising from the earth. The lake appeared through the trees like a secret waiting to be remembered, still, shimmering, untouched. I laid out my towel on the warm grass near the water's edge and unwrapped the robe from my shoulders. The breeze teased the hem of my swimsuit as I smoothed the body oil over my arms and legs, the scent mixing with the heat in the air. I bit into a strawberry, juice slipping down my thumb, and waited. I didn't know what for, only that I was no longer alone in my longing. The sun had risen higher now, soft golden rays dancing over the surface of the lake. I had just finished the last of the strawberries, the tangy sweetness still lingering on my tongue, when my thoughts began to drift again, to that persistent ache I had tried to push aside the night before. With my towel tucked around my hips and the warm breeze kissing every inch of exposed skin, I leaned back, reaching casually into my bag. My fingers brushed over the smooth shape of the toy I had packed, more from habit than intention. It was the kind of private indulgence I never imagined bringing beyond the bedroom. But something about today, about being away from everything familiar, had untethered me. I had just hesitated, my hand still resting over the velvet pouch, when I heard the rustle of branches and the snap of a twig. "Hey, Adam!" "No, Ethan," called out. His voice pulled me back so quickly, it felt like being caught in a dream. I turned, my hand darting away from the bag as though it had burned me. He stood at the edge of the clearing, framed by the trees, wearing only a loose pair of charcoal gray shorts that hung low on his hips. His chest was bare, sun catching in the fine golden hairs on his arms and the line that led down his stomach. His skin was warm from the walk, and damp with the sheen of the growing heat. I blinked, smiled too quickly. "That was fast," I said, shielding my eyes against the glare as he stepped closer. "Didn't want you to get too far ahead," he replied, his grin easy, but I saw the quick flick of his eyes over me again, the curve of my legs, the red of my swimsuit, the way my hair stuck slightly to my neck from the oil. It was subtle, but it wasn't lost on me. He set his towel beside mine and sat down, arms propped behind him as he stretched out his long legs. I watched the muscles shift beneath his skin, every movement fluid, unconscious, and it took everything in me not to stare. For a while we said nothing. The water lapped gently at the shore, the wind stirring the tall reeds, the moment sitting heavy between us. I could feel him glancing at me, just as I could feel the heat blooming low in my belly again. I shifted slightly, trying to compose myself, folding one leg over the other, pretending to adjust my sunglasses. "You always tan so easily," he said quietly, watching the light play over my skin. "I remember when we came here years ago. You'd fall asleep and wake up looking like a sun goddess." I laughed, but there was a catch in it. "That's generous. I remember peeling for days." He smiled but didn't look away. "Still, you look good." The words settled between us with a strange weight. I didn't answer. Couldn't. He stood a moment later, brushing off his hands. "I think I'll take a quick swim," he said, his voice light again, but something lingered beneath it, something neither of us dared name. He stepped toward the water, his shoulders strong and back relaxed as he walked slowly in. The lake welcomed him, the ripples forming in widening rings as he dove under the surface. I watched him emerge, his hair slicked back, droplets glistening on his skin. I had never noticed how grown he'd become. Not like this. My heart thudded low and slow in my chest as I watched him float on his back, eyes closed to the sun, the silence between us deeper than before. I reached again, slowly this time, into the bag, my fingers brushing the edge of my secret. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because I wasn't alone anymore. And some things, once felt, couldn't be unfelt. Adam emerged from the lake with slow, deliberate strides, water trailing down his chest and legs, each drop catching sunlight like liquid crystal. His hair was slicked back, face flushed, eyes glinting with something playful. "You just going to sit there and admire the view?" he teased, grinning wide as he approached. Before I could answer, he shook his head like a dog, sending a burst of cold water in my direction. "Adam!" I gasped, raising a hand in defense, laughing in spite of myself. "Consider it revenge for not waiting for me," he said, his voice light, but behind the humor was something deeper, something we didn't name but both felt. He sat back down beside me, breath slightly quickened from the swim, his skin gleaming, smelling of fresh water and sun. I adjusted my towel, laying it out flat before stretching out on my stomach, turning my head to one side and letting my arms fall lazily by my sides. "I need your help with something," I said casually, the words rehearsed in my head 100 times. "Oh!" His voice was closer now, curious. "My back," I murmured. "I can't reach it properly. The oil's in the bag." There was a pause, just long enough to feel it. Then I heard the rustle of him reaching for the bottle, the soft pop of the cap opening. I closed my eyes as I felt the first touch, warm, deliberate, the oil gliding onto the small of my back with a gentleness that made my breath catch. He said nothing, and neither did I. His hands worked slowly, spreading the oil up my back, over my shoulders, then down again, lower. When he reached the curve just above my hips, I shifted slightly, letting out a soft breath, pretending it was just comfort I sought. "You okay?" he asked quietly, his voice tighter now. "Ma'am," I said, barely audible. "Just feels nice." His hand stilled for half a second before continuing, his touch lingering in ways I could no longer dismiss as accidental. I could feel the restraint in his movements, the careful way he avoided going too far, and yet every inch he covered felt electric. When he finished, I turned my head to look at him, my voice softer now. "Your turn." He blinked. "What?" "You'll burn without something," I said, sitting up slowly and reaching for the bottle. "It's only fair." He hesitated, but only for a moment, then gave a quiet nod, turning his back toward me. His skin was warm beneath my fingers, the scent of oil rising between us. I smoothed it over his shoulders, down his spine, feeling the quiet tension in his muscles. His breath hitched once when I reached lower, fingers trailing just above the waistline of his shorts. I tried not to glance down, but I did. And what I saw confirmed what I already suspected. He may have said nothing, but his body was speaking for him. His skin was still warm beneath my hands, the oil shimmering over his back as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the grass. I took my time, though my heart was beating far too fast, every brush of my fingertips guided not just by care, but by something I had tried for days, maybe years, to ignore. When I finished, I capped the bottle with hands that felt far from steady. Adam, still facing away from me, was silent. I watched the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers curled against his knees. Then, without a word, he turned. There was nothing playful in his expression now. His eyes met mine, open, vulnerable, and fierce all at once. The teasing grin he'd worn earlier had vanished, replaced with something raw, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, not tentatively, not awkwardly, but with the weight of someone who had been holding back too much for too long. And I let him. I melted into him. The heat of the sun nothing compared to the warmth that passed between us. Our bodies pressed together in the quiet afternoon. Skin on skin, breath on breath. The world receded, the trees, the lake, the rules we had lived by. They all fell away. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. His heartbeat thudded against mine, and we stood like that for a long time, holding each other in silence, as though the embrace could undo years of aching restraint. His hand moved slowly up my back, and I felt it then, the rhythm. That unspoken pull, the shared breath, the quiet swaying that came not from music, but from the unmistakable beat of recognition. It wasn't a decision. It wasn't planned. It was a culmination. The hidden volcano of feeling that had grown slowly, secretly, patiently, finally erupted in the stillness between us. A surrender not just to each other, but to the truth we had both been too afraid to admit. And in that moment, under the late summer sky, nothing else existed. Only us. Only this. We stayed like that, held in each other's arms, until the warmth of the sun began to dim slightly. The breeze cooled our skin but did nothing to settle the storm that had passed between us, or the one still quietly brewing beneath the surface. Adam pulled back slightly, his hand still resting on my waist. He looked at me, a faint smile touching his lips, eyes flicking downward for a moment before he said softly, "Do you have any water?" The question was so ordinary, so innocent it almost made me laugh. I nodded, still catching my breath. "In my bag," I replied, gesturing to where it sat beneath the shade of the pine tree. He moved to it, kneeling beside the basket, lifting the towel that partially covered the contents. And then I realized. He was about to see it. Before I could reach him, before I could divert his attention or make some rushed excuse. His fingers brushed against the velvet pouch tucked beneath the folded napkins and fruit. He paused, lifted it slightly, and looked at me. The look in his eyes wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was something else, understanding. A quiet recognition that spoke volumes without a single word. I felt a surge of heat rise in my cheeks, but I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. Instead, I lifted my chin slightly, letting the silence between us hold what couldn't be explained. Because I didn't need to. He stood slowly, the pouch now quietly resting back in the basket. He walked back to me, his voice low, steady. "If you came here to relax," he said, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from my shoulder, "then lie down. Let me give you a massage." His fingers grazed the small of my back again, and I obeyed without a word, lowering myself to the towel, heart thrumming against the earth. He knelt beside me, his hands warm, sure, smoothing oil into my shoulders, my back, the space between us vanishing with each touch. But before I could speak, before I could turn to meet his gaze, he leaned down, slowly, deliberately, and he kissed me, not in a rush, not in confusion, but with intention. His lips against mine felt like everything I had resisted and everything I had needed. A gentle fall into something inevitable, something forbidden and sacred all at once. I closed my eyes and let it happen, not because I had lost control but because I had finally stopped pretending. The trees stood still around us. The lake shimmered like a mirror of the sky. And for a moment we were not mother and son, not figures bound by roles or names, but two people, drawn into something deeper than reason could hold. And in that suspended world we stayed.